Cheating on a beloved wife is scary in the first place. Her feminine nature perceives adultery as a kind of victory over her husband, giving her the right to subsequent freedom of action. There are many examples of the true feminine nature in history. There are many cases where a wife easily exchanged her husband for his worst enemy, even if he killed the father of her children, and easily went for intimacy with someone who was closer at the moment when she wanted love. With few exceptions, love, traditional upbringing, religion, close kinship, it is easy for a woman to come into contact with another, especially when away from home and family, at a resort or on a business trip. Freedom and all sorts of ready-made men. The wife even becomes proud of her cheating, and rarely stops after the first successful time. There is a sense of superiority and squeamish pity for her horny husband inside her, and sometimes she can't stand to brag. And how about it? Her husband may not have time to know about her victories, and it's so sweet to watch him humiliated. Pity the husband. No one deserves that. Pity for those husbands whose wives love or at least respect them in other cases, and this is the majority. Wretched wives from fornication are kept by fear of loss of material well-being. Alas, this is the reality of family life these days. My wife and I had a passionate love affair. We met at a party and never parted. We dated for almost a year. We understood each other almost without a word. Our hearts beat in unison. We got married early. I was 20 and Jessica was 19. A son was born 9 months later, then a daughter 4 years later. We lived happily ever after. I graduated from Stanford University, joined the Army for 2 years, and stayed there as a career officer. What was there to return to on an engineer's penny salary? The Army paid good money for those days. My wife did not have to work. My money was quite enough to support my family. Right after my wedding, my parents died in a car accident. Of all my family, I had only my grandfather, Aaron, and he lived far away from me in the Canadian countryside. There was no way to get him out of there. My service was going quite well. After 5 years, I was stationed in the Western Group of Forces in the GDR. After 1 year of service, I went to Africa, to Eritrea as an instructor. One day, on my way back from an operation, my armored personnel carrier hit a mine. I was sitting on the armor with my legs over the side, and the blast wave tossed me 7 meters off the road. My back hit the ground and I lost consciousness for a while. When it came to consciousness, I could not breathe freely for a long time. In the hospital, the good doctor said I was born with my shirt on, fractured spine. But I'm all right now. I would live, but he said that the consequences could be sad. But they will not appear soon. So for the time being, Captain, live and rejoice. I did rejoice with my family. I've been to Serbia and Africa again. I reached the age of 45 and retired as a colonel. Not God knows what, as many might think. Colonels are divided into 3 types: Mr. Colonel, Hunt Colonel, and Hey Colonel. So here I am, hey, with a small pension and a set of standard officer awards. I kept my parents' 3-room flat in my hometown. We moved in there. During the service, we saved up some money, so that was enough for the first time. It would have been all right, but the consequences of the back injury did not keep me waiting long. At first, I just had pain in my back and lower back. Then my leg began to go numb. Weeks later, I began to have wild pains in the spine and the failure of my left leg. So in time, with a quiet sadness, I became a subhuman and a part-time under-husband. I can't say that Jessica and I have had a bad life all this time. There were things that happened, but there was no cheating on me or my wife. Until Jessica went to work, after I got out of the Army, that's where it all kicked off. Lately, I've been in and out of hospitals a lot, and staying there for long periods of time. There was a time when I underwent treatment and rehabilitation for almost 6 months. My wife came to see me at first, but then disappeared. My son came to visit. He told me that my mom had broken her leg and couldn't come. Jessica showed up 4 months later, said she was in rehab, etc. At first glance, her attitude toward me had not changed. But that is at first glance. Jessica began to travel frequently, sometimes for long periods. Several times she went to a sanatorium with a friend. She said I wasn't allowed, and she was terribly tired. She talked on the phone for long periods of time, hanging up on me as I approached. I knew Jessica was seeing someone, but my suspicions weren't really fleshed out. So one day I was surfing the internet and got into my wife's classmates page. She'd forgotten to close it. There I came across a very interesting photo. The picture was of a happy family, a woman with her head tilted toward a young man holding her hand. The man was holding a 1-year-old baby in his free hand. The family was staring into the lens and grinning happily. So in the role of the happy woman was my Jessica. I went through her friends on the site and found this Mako guy. I opened his page and went nuts. One of the pictures posted was of Jessica with her infant baby, and they were being hugged by a happy man, the same one from the first picture. And the caption was our baby. So if you think your wife is cheating, you know it's not you. Schwilkrumst. Wow. It's Jessica. Having an affair on the side, living two lives, and having a baby. When did she do that? I figured it out just as I was lying in the hospital for a long time. Apparently, she got pregnant even earlier. But she was too young and it was not noticeable. And then she broke her leg. I decided to take it easy and figure it all out through a former colleague of mine who was a police officer. I found out all about this man who had a relationship with Jessica. He had been hanging out with my wife for almost 2 years now, made her a baby, and sort of got her married. I realized that was the end of it. If a woman gives birth to another man, there's no going back. I've never been able to understand the phrase "you have to fight for love." Love is either there or it isn't. There's no other way. Fight or not. If you've fallen out of love, smash your head against the wall. You won't change anything. Time kills love. Well, I was thinking about how I could talk to Jessica about our relationship. It sorted itself out. One night, Jessica brought her businessman over to our house. They sat down in the hall and began a heartwarming conversation with me. Or rather, the lover spoke, and Jessica just nodded. They talked about how Jessica was still young, that I was a burden to her, she would end up ruining her life with me, and so on. I listened patiently. But when he offered to vacate the apartment, my parents' apartment, and move into a nursing home, I politely called him closer to me. It's inspecting, hey, with the contemptuous smile of an alpha male, leaned toward me. I understood everything and wanted to warn him. But it was too late. I had a good right hook, so the man felt it as a sledgehammer to the jaw. He rolled his eyes and flew off into the corner, banging his head against the wall. I knew I'd overreacted. That blow could not change anything. Well, at least it was something. Understandably, Jessica screamed and tried to bring her lover to his senses. She explained to me in passing who I was. These were the most affectionate epithets my wife used toward me. I listened without interrupting, waited for her lover to return from heaven to sinful earth, and suggested they get the hell out of my house. Next, the man, spitting blood through chipped teeth, threatened to meet me in a dark alley and took his treasure in an armful and stormed out of my apartment. As he left, the woman I once loved dearly, for whom I would not have spared my life, did not even look in my direction. I had lived enough, but I did not know then with what ease women renounce their former love, without hesitation, lightning fast, and thoughtlessly cruel. I expected the businessman to call the police, but he didn't. Jessica must have talked him out of it. What finally got to me was my children's decision to go live with their mother and her new husband. No one wants sick fathers. I drank for 2 months, constantly on a binge. Everything inside me burned out. When I started confusing the day with the night, I realized that if I didn't go to my grandfather in the middle of nowhere, I would either get really drunk or I would go crazy. During all this time, my kids never once called me. Moreover, they did not answer my calls. Nothing else kept me in this town. I stood in the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror, a pathetic sight. A bruised face with thin webs of veins and bags under my eyes, long dirty hair, and a beard that looked more like a washcloth. Only a silver army badge on a lanyard and a bat-shaped tattoo on my forearm reminded me of my military past. At train station, I bought a ticket for the evening train without much trouble and gave Grandpa Aaron a telegram. A new turn in my fate was beginning. I returned to the city late at night and immediately plunged into the whirlpool of events. As soon as I turned on my cell phone, messages about missed calls poured in. The lion's share were calls from combat, a few calls from unknown numbers, and to my great surprise, a few from Jessica. What did she want? I immediately dialed combat. Connor, we need to meet. There's a theme. How are you doing? When and where? I also tried to be very brief. Tomorrow in the restaurant of the Plaza Hotel at 19 o'clock. They wouldn't let me in there with my face. Shave your face, spray cologne, and wash your jeans. Top the crap. I'm waiting. Bye. Combat passed out. I went into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was like a face. Really, what was there to be fooled about? I smiled. I wonder what he wanted to offer me. I felt great. I could not even believe that there was a time when I could hardly move. My back did not hurt. Only sometimes at night I woke up with pain in my left leg, as if reminding me of the past illness. I looked in the refrigerator. It was empty. Well, nothing. The situation was normal. I took a piece of lard and a jar of pickled mushrooms with me when I left for town. I'll go get some bread. The doorbell rang? Strangely, I'm not expecting anyone. There was Jessica standing on the landing. Yes, unexpected. What do you want? I really didn't want to see her. Connor, I'm begging you, listen to me. She spoke softly, avoiding meeting my eyes. Can I come in? I come into the kitchen, I said, letting the uninvited guest in. She sat down on a stool and stared at the floor in silence for a while, gathering her thoughts. I left Ben. What's up? There was so much love. Did you find a new friend? I really didn't care about her problems with Ben or anyone else for that matter. I didn't have bread for dinner. That was what was bothering me the most right now. What about our baby? Did Ben plant it? Connor, it's not his baby. I saw her eyes fill with tears. Ben took a DNA test, and that's where it all came out. What difference does it make? Fine, not mine, whatever. What else you doing here? You ran enough money. You made your choice. You and the kids. What do you want from me? Is the boy sick? He needs money for treatment. Oh, come on. What do I have to do with this? I don't have any money. Connor, please. He's in intensive care right now. The doctors say if they don't operate soon, he's going to die. I don't have any money. What about the apartment? We could sell it. Jessica, you're out of your mind. Connor, we lived together for 20 years. I remember. I interrupted her. Just when you betrayed me. When you left me, you didn't think about that. I suddenly thought that our conversation reminds me of a scene from a cheap melodrama. Connor died and Calmer, I'm sorry. There hasn't been a day I haven't thought about you. She was almost crying. I made a terrible mistake. I betrayed you, our family. She continued to speak, and I looked silently at my once madly beloved woman. The woman I would not hesitate to give my life for. The woman who had not hesitated to cynically betray me in my time of need. The woman who cut me out of her life and left me for another man. And now she suddenly came to her senses and asked for my help. Jessica kept saying that her time without me had made her realize how much she loved me, that she only now understood that I was the only real man in her life. Her words lingered, lulled me into a fantasy that only I own her heart. I'm sorry. She kept repeating that word like a spell, and I looked at her and imagined her kissing and caressing her lover. Did she really think I would believe her words? That she was confused, that she didn't know what she wanted? That this woman who cheated on me, had a child with her lover, left me, and spent her free time with another man and never thought of me, came back because it turns out she loved only me. In her time, she found an excuse for her meanness and did not hesitate to leave me. She had enjoyed her sensual pleasures with her lover more than once in his bed, and she had coldly planned the moment to give me one last fatal blow. My God! Did I seem so stupid to her, ready to believe all her lies? I listened in silence to her remorse-filled monologue. I had something to say to her. When the heat was on, you remembered you had a husband. I was overwhelmed with emotion. I don't care about you or your Vic didn't finish. Jessica suddenly fell to her knees. Connor, honey, help me. He's just a little boy. It's not his fault. We're at my mom's place in the one-room apartment. Everything. We would still love my mom's apartment, but we have nowhere to live. Jessica burst into tears. Jessica, go away. I turned away, so I wouldn't have to see her cry. What do I care about her and her child, and try to stay out of my sight again? Jessica sensed something in my voice, and without wiping away her tears, she headed for the door. Connor, she had something else to say to me. Get out. I almost shouted. The front door slammed. I never made it out for bread. Jessica wandered down the first snow-covered street. She knew there was no more hope. In desperation, she wanted to scream, so she put her hand over her mouth. Jessica took the last trolley to the hospital. TD lay in a private room, hooked up to a machine, tangled in tubes and drips. By his bed, in a white robe draped over his shoulders, sat her mother. Well, Jessica shook her head negatively. Connor refused to help. She covered her face with her hands and wept silently. Well, hello, Connor. Hello, Combat. We hugged and kissed, then pulled away and looked at each other. Yes, time is not sparing, even best friends. Combat was almost unchanged, only his hair was white. But it suited him. Strict gray suit with a sparkle, blue shirt, purple tie, a Swiss Hanover militaire, and a platinum ring on the ring finger of his right hand completed the ensemble. A respectable businessman, sitting on an oil pipe, to say the least. We were having dinner in a chic restaurant on the 8th floor of the Plaza Hotel, where Combat was staying. The restaurant was buzzing with people, fast-walking waitresses, and an orchestra was singing Latin American rhythms. Antique furniture, vintage guitars on the walls, and the lights of a huge night city behind the large, from floor to ceiling, mirrored windows. Juicy chops had already been served, and we poured for the umpteenth time. "Let's drink 2 hours," without shouting. Combat raised his shot glass and silently poured the vodka into his mouth. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second and exhaled. "Well, what do you say?" He went back to our conversation. I chewed a piece of chop and sighed. "Do not sigh like a maiden before the wedding. You have a job to do." Combat picked up a sprat with a fork and put it on the bread. "The salad is excellent, as they say, all-inclusive. Full social package and all the rest." "Well, you got it." Phew, as if I was recruited to a strip club. I laughed. Combat did not share my fun. We were quiet for a while. "Well, what's your decision?" Combat then looked at his watch. "I agree. When do we fly out?" "Calm." My interlocutor stood up, making it clear that the audience was over. The doorbell rang. Jessica pushed her head away from the pillow. Sleepless nights were taking their toll and went to the door. "Who is it?" "The messenger." "Jessica, is that you?" Jessica opened the door. "It's what, courier?" She wasn't expecting anyone. The young guy handed her a package. "This is for you to sign." Jessica saw her last name on the package. "Who is it from?" "I don't know. My job is to deliver it. Goodbye." The boy turned and ran down the stairs. Jessica went into the kitchen and carefully opened the envelope. She unfolded the folded quadruple documents, the deed to the apartment and the keys. God, she couldn't believe her eyes. Connor had given her his apartment. Jessica crouched in her chair, her legs not holding her. There was still a note in the envelope. With a trembling hand, she unfolded the piece of paper. The tears were covering her eyes, but she managed to read it. "I'm not such a bastard anymore. Goodbye." There was no signature. The helicar circled the bend of the Moenga, propelling its brown waters. "Landing." Combat commanded over the intercom. The helicopter tilted slightly, aiming at the narrow strip of beach bordering the jungle. The helicopter steadily landed, just short of touching the approaching trees. The engine stopped, but the blades kept turning. "What's the situation?" from the voice of the platoon leader. Everything was normal. The navigator announced and opened the door. Soldiers in camouflage without insignia, holding their machine guns at the ready, began to jump out onto the sand, taking up a circular defense. Me and Combat were the last to leave the helicopter. I habitually put the RPK on my shoulder and looked for a local guide.